Hi, everyone. Welcome to February 3rd, Now Next Later. Sasha and I are joined today by Kristin Broadley. I'm really excited for you to hear from her. So as the attendees come in, it always takes about 10 seconds to get everybody in from the waiting room. While they're coming in and getting set up, Kristin, I won't try to do it. You are, I think, one of, if not the first person I met from Quicken Loans when I was coming on board in 2015, 2016. And we've been working together ever since in a variety of ways. But I don't want to steal your thunder. So I'll let you introduce yourself and your business and what you're working on. But thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me. I apologize that your first kind of meet and greet with Cooking People was me. But we had fun. We had a good time working together. So Kristin Broadley, I am co-founder of Accelerated Advisors. And with Jeremy, worked at Rocket Mortgage. I was there for 20 years. Ran risk, credit, servicing, AML, QC, ERM, laundry list of items. Also ran operations group. If there was a group that, needed a little bit of fixing, I was kind of deployed to those areas. And so I had a ton of fun there. And after 20 years, there came a day I was like, okay, it's time possibly to spread my wings a little bit. So co-founded Accelerate Advisor. We are a firm that works with vendors. We find the unicorns in the industry. Maybe they don't have a large network. They don't have a lot of visibility, but having understood origination from application through servicing payoff, I know the things that'll benefit the industry overarchingly. And so we help create an incubator for those vendors. So that's what I'm doing today. And I'm happy to be here.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we're happy to have you. I mean, Now Next Later is the forward-looking innovation and product development part of, the Chrisman lineup each week. We are presented today by Silk Title, and I think that goes well with the innovation and automation that we're going to talk about a lot. Sasha, one of the things that I always credit Kristin with, and there's a bunch, but one that I'll bring up specifically for this audience in that context is we kind of had a habit at Rocket of never accepting the first impression of a loan or the first impression of a buyback or a repurchase or the first impression of a defect. It was always like, what else do we know about this? What other data is there? What's in the notes? What's in the file? And I think a lot of times, on this show, especially you and I talk about data management and file quality, but I think we don't talk enough about creativity in risk management, QC, and in product development, and how much we learned by having a team that dug into loans and said, oh, look at this, look at the way you could look at this income, look at the way you could look at this underwriting decision, look at the way you could look at this appraisal, going back to investors and saying, we think you should look at this differently because we found more information you maybe didn't consider in that file transfer or that standardized file set that you analyze. And so I think today, I hope we bring out a lot of that creativity and what it can do for your business. Because I think it really benefited Quicken Rocket to think about it that way. There's more to a file. There's always more to find to tell the better story.
I love that practice in general. It makes me think of Ted Lasso and his never ending need for curiosity, which I love as well. But I do, as I think about it, I mean, imagine how many loans and files people are reviewing every day. And it would be so easy to fall into the trap of just saying, well, it looks just like the last one, so must be this, right? And when we fall into those cognitive biases, we lose that critical thinking that's so important. Sorry if you can hear my dog shaking in the background, to help us uncover what I consider the edge cases, which I believe every loan, whether conventional 30-year or otherwise, is an edge case. Like I've never seen two loans that are identical. And so it's a good practice to put people in that mindset of how do you really lean into the critical thinking, question the assumptions, and not just accept that first answer as that's it. That's the answer.
That's the story, right?
I love
exactly. Yeah, well, great. Kristin, let's start there then. You are helping a variety of, like you said, tech platforms, service provider vendors, as well as lenders work together and fix kind of these moments that have risen to the top for you as like the top areas lenders struggle with. So in in our now, next, later structure, we were hoping you could start with now and tell us what is happening today in lenders' businesses, in these tech platforms that are trying to sell into lenders. What are you seeing as the top issues people are struggling with in loan manufacturing?
So, as the origination process evolves, as the manufacturing process evolves, the quality, the QC program and process needs to evolve as well. And that's something that is legacy. It's been around forever. I think other than a few different areas of the guide, it hasn't been updated since 2015. That was before a lot of this automation. It is still a very tactical, driven program and process where you have auditors taking the look at the loan file, then it goes to another review, then it goes to another review, and then maybe it makes its way to the lender. And so from the lender perspective, it is very, very expensive. It's very resource driven. It takes time, energy, effort. It takes curiosity. It takes creativity. It takes all of these things in order to address some of these demands. And so we really need to evolve the program and process of repurchase. I did it for so many years. And, there were times where, material mattered. There was times where reasonable mattered. And then a few years ago, it was like, no, we're no longer a partner. We're now an enforcer. And so depending upon who runs the specific area and what it is that they're doing, is the auditor new? Is it not? Do you understand the demand? Right? What is the auditor telling you is the area? What's the impact? They're saying income's wrong. By how much and where? Show me. And then also, if you don't understand what's being asked, push back. You are not in the business of being helpful when it comes to a repurchase. So, there's a lot of tactics you can deploy. First and foremost is understand what it's coming back for. And then doing that deep dive, understanding the loan itself. Because quite often, as we go through this process and we try to speed to close, we don't necessarily get all the information. We don't necessarily get all the income. We don't necessarily get all the assets. There are all of these things that can remediate a demand simply by getting additional information and engaging with the client. And then if you find, you do have a defect, is it material? Is it not? Once you get to that point and you're having that conversation, you can go ahead and move forward. Is the auditor new? Are they not? There's, we kind of had a saying in our group, we're the first in the ring and the last to leave. And so we left nothing on the table. We took it personally when it came to the dollars that are going out the door when you're signing a wire in order to purchase a loan. That was personal to us. It was expensive. And so we treated every demand that way. It annoyed a lot of folks. It also stopped a lot of demands from coming in the door. There's an unintended consequence of being the friction in the process. And so, again, it takes time, energy, effort. You've got to have someone that's super committed to it. You have to have a team that's super committed to it. But, having that really robust repurchase program and process makes a big difference, both, today and, as it being a lagging indicator looking into the past.
You made some great points, Kristin, and not to disparage the repurchase activities that happen, but so much of it does have subjectivity built in.
Mhm.
And when you do push back, you mentioned a couple things. One, you get to the root of it to ensure that an objective decision is being made one way or the other. And then the other is, if you're the one pushing back, eventually people start to go, okay, fine. I'm not going to come knocking on your door, which may or may not be the right way to handle it. However, it's a nice strategy to keep people away from you. And I'm also would be remiss if I didn't mention, and I think I read it in the end of year report from CHLA, their efforts that really pushed, and I'm sure MBA and others did too, to get indemnifications in place so that at least if there's an opportunity to take responsibility without having to do a buyback scenario, you're saving some. It's not perfect, but to an extent, you are mitigating that risk, I'll say, to your bottom line. And I just, I know that that's been a hard thing for lenders over the last year, as it felt like there was so much more scrutiny over the last couple of years in this area. So I love everything you're saying. And I also huge shout out to all organizations out there that do the hard work every day that we don't always see, to ensure that lenders are protected as much as possible in this area.
Yeah, I absolutely agree there. I think there's a little caveat to the indemnification agreement. And that is if you are direct lender to the GSEs, and you hold the liability, then an indemnification agreement can be great. Indemnification with like a credit enhancement fee, maybe not as much. But if you are selling to an aggregator, you may not have access to an indemnification agreement because that aggregator is not necessarily going to kick the can on the liability because they may or may not assume you may be viable in the next 2 or 3 years if and when that loan defaults and if they come back in order to demand repurchase. So it is a very disparate experience depending upon where you are in the food chain.
That's a great clarification. I'm having some flashbacks to law school. You know, what did the party know and should have the party known, right? That's really what we're talking about with originating mortgage companies, originators, whether you're direct to Fannie and Freddie or whether you're selling to an aggregator, which is, what did I know? Okay, that's step one, Sasha. That's a great point, right? Like, what did we know? But then what should we have known? Your point about subjectivity, like if we couldn't have, shouldn't have, and or we it doesn't change anything, to Kristin's point about materiality, then you can really have, I would think, a pretty professional conversation with the GSEs to say, okay, let's talk about this. What is really going on here? One of the things I think lenders struggle with, Kristin, you hinted at it with the cost of credit enhancement or the cost of indemnification. The team you assembled, at least the way you just described it, sounds quite sophisticated, for lack of a better word, like people who know how to dig into a loan, know how a loan is structured, know what documentation may or may not be available in certain systems, like creative thinkers who also like really understand the definition of credit policy, the definition of certain loan delivery fields, data fields. Can you talk a little bit about whether I should be spending money on that or whether I should be spending money on credit enhancement? Meaning, like, how do you advise, or how would you advise if you launched a mortgage company, building a team that pushes back versus it's really Freddie, I guess, at this point. Freddie's going to give me this fee and they're going to indemnify me, so I'll just pay that instead of having a team defend me. Can you talk a little bit about that balance and what best practices are for lenders?
Well, so we would look at a variety of ways once a loan came in the door. Once we did our due diligence, once we understood what the issue was, once we understood what our liability could be, we would look at what does repurchase look like? What does, a resale look like? Scratch and dent. What does indemnification look like? What is the cost of maybe fixing the property? If something was missed with collateral and it was a matter of it needed to be repaired, it could cost less to repair it than it did to buy the loan back. And so we did this analysis on all the loans that we weren't able to overturn immediately, and even not immediately, with some time. If it was getting to the point where we were looking at it to kind of address that liability that we may or may not have, we did that analysis and we looked at a variety of different ways in order to remediate and what would happen if we bought that loan back.
Okay. And so when you run, like if you were going to run that for a lender that doesn't have experience building out all those different analyses or all those different models, how should I think about either building that team internally? Like, we talk a lot about cross training on this show and what other people can be doing and how you do career paths and things like that, because innovation does require a broad sense of everything across the ecosystem, the pipeline, versus maybe turning to an insurance company or a partner, whether that's in the MI world or whether that's in some other provider that steps in. Kristin and I worked for a long time, Sasha, for a leader named Bob Walters, and he would always ask me the challenge question. I'd want to create a new product or a new thing, especially fintech, and he'd say, but can I insure over it? Can I just pay and get out of this? Like, how do I just insure over it? And not everybody's going to think that same way. It's a business decision for sure. But Kristin, I'm curious, like, hearing that and then advising growing or wanting to be larger lenders, lenders who want to be larger than they are. How should they think about that to step their game up to the next level?
So my advice would be stop looking in the rear view, right? This is the next portion. So you can, there are folks out there, me, others that can, help you build those programs and processes, but repurchases are a lagging indicator. It's something, the cart, the horse is already out of the barn. So how are you thinking about your manufacturing health right now? What programs and processes are you putting in place? What automation are you leveraging in those areas where you have high defects or where high defects exist across the industry? How are you thinking about vendor management? How are you thinking about leveraging and creating SLAs with vendors as you go into an automated space? What are you looking at from that perspective? How are you building that program? Because you can consistently look in the rear view, or you can move forward and, be proactive about it. And I would advise being proactive. You can figure out the repurchases that are going to come your way, but be proactive so you don't get them in the first place.
I love the saying, the rear view mirror is smaller than the windshield for a reason.
Yes.
Right. And as a vendor, it's going to pain me to say this out loud. However, I love the SLA point, right? There are things that you can hold your vendors accountable to, especially as it relates to technology becoming more prominently a part of the process, to ensure that you are protected to the best that you can be. And it's not always a one-for-one. There are lots of vendors in the ecosystem. And so I can't control what AWS does, and so on and so forth. But there is some power there that lenders do have that I think maybe some don't all have the necessarily the background to understand, where they've got some power there to position themselves to be in a better place. So it's a good point. Good call out.
Absolutely. I want to talk more about the windshield. This is a perfect opportunity, kind of what's next. What do we see coming down the street? This is an unpredictable year. The last couple of weeks of Now Next Later, we've been talking about how unpredictable it is relative to things. But a lot of lenders and a lot of partners, service providers, tech companies that we're talking to have baked in their roadmap and their budget for 2025. So you have your existing roadmap, your existing budget with this unpredictable year. Kristin, we were hoping you could tell us a little bit about, as automation comes online in the manufacturing process, what's next? What are lenders dealing with? What are unintended consequences, perhaps, or just your top 3 things that, as you see automation take hold in the process, what is in the lender's to-do list?
So I think the biggest opportunity lenders have is achieving ROI when it comes to doing transformational change, leveraging automation within their program and processes. Transformational change, project management, getting, executive stakeholders going through the whole process and then driving adoption, creating goals, understanding what your ROI is, understanding how you're going to get there, and then driving toward it. I don't know that we're necessarily good at it. And so, I've heard a lot of folks say, well, I adopted this program or this process, but nobody's using it. I have experienced that as well, where, we went down some extraordinary, automated processes, and we used a variety of different vendors, but we couldn't get LOs to involve clients. You have your super users, and then you have the folks that just like the way things have always been done. And so making sure that culturally your organization is aligned with the transformation you want to see, and that you are driving your organization to that ROI, will make all the difference in the next year. And then also pivoting. If it isn't working, if your roadmap could be set for 2025, but you find that there's something in market that can help you remediate repurchases, that can, speed scalability in your organization, because, we're not going to be in a purchase market forever. All of these things that you're looking at, be willing to pivot and look at what's out there. The small and mid-sized lenders have some extraordinary opportunities because there are so many smart people building extraordinary products. Understanding where your manufacturing process can best benefit, and then driving that ROI and then achieving it, that's everything for 2025.
Kristin, Jeremy and I are all too familiar with adoption failures with technology. And I'm curious, you hit on a great point, right? It starts at the top. You need your advocates within the business for sure, but you have to have leadership aligned on where the priorities are and how to move certain initiatives forward. And you add that on top of the day-to-day management of an IMB credit union bank that is already enough. What have you seen work with leaders that are able to carry that torch from an adoption standpoint to really drive change and transformation in an organization? Because it's an upward hill battle.
So it's internal marketing, right? So you have your executive sponsor, maybe they're out there messaging the entire company every day. They're sitting down with folks. You're having roundtables after these things deploy to figure out why it's working and why it's not. It may just be a tweak. It may be a policy. People may not be aware. There's 1,001 different reasons why folks don't do it. You can incentivize folks to do it. There's a little bit of the carrot and the stick, right? This is our culture. This is who we are. You have to do this moving forward. And then you have metrics. Just like, with any marketing strategy, when it's external, you're figuring out who you're reaching, how you're reaching, is it moving the needle? The same thing has to happen internally. There's a lot of set it and forget it. And we can't do that if we want systemic transformational change within our organizations.
Great points. And perfect for regardless of technology or internal program or any other change management that you have to manage as a lender, right? I love that.
That's right.
It's funny. I'm thinking of that opening line from Anna Karenina where it says, all happy families are alike and all unhappy families are unhappy in their own way. And it almost seems like when things are going well at a lender, we hear all the same themes of like what worked, the discipline around the internal champion, the discipline around that internal marketing. And when it's not, we hear a variety of stories as to why it wasn't in this case or in that case, right? And so I'm going to get into the specifics a little bit here, just because I'm curious, both of your experiences with this. You have your internal champion says, I love this, I want to do this. Mm-hmm. One of the big questions I get, especially from mid-size and above size lenders, is project managers or PMO offices. Is there any experience you have where you would recommend my champion, and I need to assign a champion, obviously, but my champion also needs that person or that support? I don't know that there's a right answer because I think it goes to maybe the culture of the champion and the lender, but just out of curiosity, let's get into some of the, how do you get adoption? How do you get that internal marketing to take hold? Any advice there on project management specifically?
Sasha, you want to go first?
You want me to go first?
Sasha first and then Kristin.
Oh man, just put the pressure on. I have a love-hate relationship with PMOs and I've run them before. And I think it's because if positioned correctly, both within the organization and also with the right leadership at the helm that knows how to collaborate and execute and get things done, and there is leadership investing in them and giving them the resources they need, making good trade-off decisions, communicating well with the company on here's the priorities, here's what we're going to hold on, then I think PMOs can be very successful. If all those things are missing, which sounds like a lot, and it is a lot, then it's a waste of time, it's a bottleneck, and don't even bother because you're going to just make everyone insane.
Well, yes.
Yeah. So there we go.
And I would add to that. I would add to that is, PMO is project manager. They're fantastic at scoping. They're fantastic about creating narratives, requirements, this, that, and the other, driving technology, doing all of those things. You need someone with credibility in the origination space or the servicing space or wherever it is to run in tandem with them. So you can course correct quickly. You can have those conversations because you have that know-how. This particular requirement is not going to work. Everything works as designed. Not everything works as intended. So you need to make sure you have that level of expertise running with that project. And then you're bringing folks in, right, that are going to be your super users out of the gate so that they feel that they have an impact on the overall process, project, and then outcome.
Yeah, well said. So I appreciate that because I think that's one of those tough questions. And to Sasha, your point about how just hard the behavior is to get that right. We are at about 5 minutes left here. And so I want to move to later. We don't want to forget later. And the way I was thinking about later, Kristin, is kind of we're looking at the next year and probably the year after that, where the market, you mentioned purchase versus refi, not sure how the breakdown's going to look. We think we know, but it could change. It could pivot, to use the word earlier. The GSEs are going to start down a path of exit. We don't know exactly what that looks like on what timeline, but it has started. And then CHLA came out with a study recently. I think, Sasha, you tell me if I get this right, but it seemed like 83% of originations were IMBs last year. And so we've got IMBs with this greater share than ever before. We've got this uncertainty around the GSEs, which likely means more conservative, I would just a hunch. And then we have automation taking place around a purchase refi market, which we're not sure what the breakdown's going to look like. So I was curious, what do you see? How would you advise CEOs of independent mortgage companies and CEOs of vendors, tech companies, and service providers to approach each other, to talk to each other, to address what with that roadmap for the next 18 months, or with that outlook for the next 18 months?
With that very, very, the outlook that we don't know.
That's right.
Could possibly, maybe, kind of, sort of.
Known of unknowns.
Yes, the known of unknowns. That's for sure. So when I think about IMBs, and I think about banks, and I think about the private market re-entering, right, as the GSEs, if they, wind out of conservatorship, I think it's kind of an inflection point for the industry. Right. So you're going to have more flexibility. You're going to have more flexibility on credit standards. You're going to have more flexibility in program and process. But ultimately, when it comes down to it, as we look at the adoption around automation, speed to certainty, transparency, what is it? Sunlight's the best disinfectant, right? So, having all of those clear roles around income, around appraisal, being able to add automation to those programs and processes, it's kind of agnostic of the product that comes into the market, right? If you're doing all of those things correctly. So if you lean into your risk management, and you lean into proactive quality, and you lean into SLAs that manage the risks some of these vendors are bringing into your organization, and you do all of those things, you can pivot, add programs and process quickly. You can be ahead of the curve, so that as the industry changes, as the market changes, you're not left behind.
That almost sounds like what you're saying is, when I think about my analysis internally, my risk management folks, but even everybody looking at that manufacturing process, what you're saying is it's actually offensive as much as it is defensive. You can actually take control. It's an investment that returns above and beyond the gain on sale from a higher loan quality and from fewer defects after that. So you're really making the case for evolving the entire organization to be optimistic and proactive in what we do every day.
I think one of the biggest fallacies in our industry is that risk management is no before yes. That risk management is the deal killer. That risk management is it's the group that is going to stop you from growing. If you have a good risk management team, and if you don't find them, they should be your partner. They should be helping you speed safely forward. They should be working with you. They should be advocating for you, and they should be bringing new programs and products that can help the IMB, the credit union, the bank grow. And if you don't have folks that are doing that, you may have an opportunity there, because if you can make informed, speedy decisions, you will do well as this market shifts.
I do, Jer, I think to add on to what Kristin's saying, it's no surprise, and everyone knows IMBs have taken a stronger hold, in particular with Govy loans, right? Like that has been an entry point. The industry's gotten more complex. Many banks and even credit unions were like, I'm not doing it. It's cost prohibitive. I've got other assets to worry about. No thanks. If the market were to shift in a way that they would want to come back and play a stronger role, their competitive edge is that they do have more resources and assets to their disposal at some times. But an IMB has been stronghold in this space, managing the edge cases, managing the complexities for a while now, and they've gotten really good at it. So that's their competitive edge. So I'm all for it. Like, consumers need homes, so whoever wants to come play, come play. But I think they both have a unique competitive advantage to lean into. And to Kristin's point, you put the right process, systems, procedures, practices in place to help augment that. May the odds be ever in your favor.
Yes.
Well, perfect.
And
Well,
I'll sit
now
back
we,
and watch it all happen.
yeah. Well, Kristin, thank you so much for joining us on Now Next Later. I definitely know we'll have you back to talk about this as the market evolves, because it is, you know, as is Sylvia's point in the chat, it's a constant opportunity in this industry, and it goes right to the bottom line. Are you making money? Are you protecting the money that you made? What's your ROI? Chris, to your point earlier. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a ton of fun. I appreciate you both.
Great talk.
Excellent. Take care, Sasha. We'll talk to you again next week.
Sounds good, Jared. Bye.
Bye.